Chinese officials are warning Canada not to interfere in the country's new national security law. The Foreign Ministry hit back this morning at Ottawa's latest move, the suspension of its extradition treaty with Hong Kong. And despite accelerating tensions, there are signs that more governments could soon follow Canada's lead. Freelance reporter Patrick Falk leads off our coverage on this in Beijing. Good to see you, Patrick. What are we hearing from officials there this morning?
Good to see you, Jennifer. Well, I'm not sure there's too much you can read into the words that came out of the Foreign Ministry today. It's really just a repetition of things that we've heard many, many times before. China warning Canada not to stick its nose into Hong Kong's affairs. What was perhaps interesting, though, was that the comments that came from Zhao Lijian were remarkably similar. They were almost identical, in fact, to some of the comments that he made just a few days ago after London opened up a pathway to as many as 3 million Hong Kongers to come and live and settle in the UK. He said that China reserved the right to retaliate and that all consequences must be borne by Britain. And that says a couple of things, really. First of all, it says that, to some extent, it shows that China's being increasingly isolated, certainly from Western countries, over this national security legislation. But secondly, it also raises questions as to whether or not these threats are having any effect at this point. There was an article in the Global Times, the state-run Global Times today, saying that Canada's meddling in Hong Kong could backfire on its economy. And these are the sorts of threats that we've heard China make against India, Australia and Canada and other countries recently. So you wonder how much weight this bargaining chip holds at this point. And Canada, you have to assume, has got to be evaluating whether it's worth the price it pays to keep its trade relations with China intact at this point.
As you say, though, Patrick, Canada is not alone in this. So let's look at the growing push to suspend extraditions to Hong Kong.
Yeah, well, that's right. And that's something to bear in mind, whether or not China is biding its time to see what other blowback may be to come potentially, because there is pressure on other countries to look at their extradition treaties with Hong Kong as well. Canada, of course, was the first country to suspend its extradition arrangements with the city. But there is a coalition of lawmakers called IPAC, the Inter-Parliamentary Alliance on China, which is putting together a coordinated response to try and prevent people from being extradited to Hong Kong. That includes 9 members, the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand among them. And you have to remember that there are 20 countries that have extradition treaties with Hong Kong. Not all of those, in fact, several of those don't have the same arrangements with China. So the fact that China has, already said that under the new national security legislation that people could potentially be taken across the border from Hong Kong to China, to mainland China to face trial. I mean, a lot of countries have got to be questioning that sort of arrangement with Hong Kong at this point.
Patrick, thank you for the latest on this. Patrick Falk in Beijing.